Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, with the pandemic literally changing the way in which we live, we start a journey of caring and compassion by taking a look at the challenges people struggling with addiction face. Addicts are social beings, and addicts in recovery need their social connections. The pandemic has shut many doors to human interaction. Our special guests today, prevention specialist Maggie Ballard and Dr. Ed Gogek, an addiction psychiatrist and author of Marijuana Debunked, join me for a look into addiction and social isolation. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Maggie. Maggie, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I work for Heartland Family Service, a large nonprofit in Southwest Iowa. And the coalition that I'm a part of is PMP, Prevention Means Progress. And actually this week marks 6 years that I have been with the coalition doing prevention work and 8 years that I have been with Heartland Family Service. I also, separate from that, I guess one of the things that kind of drew me into wanting to work in prevention is the fact that I myself am in recovery. I also happen to have a cat, and with me doing this here from home, you might see her pop in. Hopefully she doesn't do anything too rambunctious during all of this, but she might show up here and there.
Thank you, Maggie. And Ed, let's hear about you. We've had a great opportunity to see you in Iowa to speak to us and our legislators, but you're out in sunny California. Tell us what you do.
Right now I'm in California. I'm a psychiatrist. I work through telemedicine. So I actually I work in Arizona, I work in the state of Washington, and I basically do general psychiatry, and then I consult for some addiction treatment programs. So basically I see psychiatric patients and treat them.
And I'd like to get
I do a lot of work with I was gonna say, I've done a lot of work with Suboxone. I've done a lot of work with opioid addicts most recently, but right now it's mostly people with depression, anxiety, ADHD, but most of my patients have substance abuse problems.
And I'd like to talk to you about one thing, get the ball rolling, is that oftentimes when I've been looking at research on addiction, they talk about the addict living a life of isolation. But then I hear you talk about the addict in recovery living a life of socialization. Can you sort of tell us a little bit about the differences between, the social existence of an addict versus an addict in recovery?
Well, the people I've talked to in recovery is very much centered around meetings, talking to other people in recovery. There's a bumper sticker that they have in Narcotics Anonymous that says an addict alone is in bad company. And it's, pulling themselves out of themselves, getting out of themselves. And that's what I found is that people are, the meetings, the groups are really important to them. The contact with other people is just really important to them. And they're maintaining that. The coronavirus really hasn't changed that at all. People I've talked to said, this is just one more thing that you overcome.
Now, do you think in the context of what we're dealing with people in recovery today, is the system ready to overcome it, or has it been a little bit of catch up? Because I know I've talked to healthcare leaders and they're scrambling to get something like telemedicine going to help people in recovery.
Well, for people running clinics, it's been a lot of catch up. I mean, I've been doing telemedicine for years, so I'm used to this, and the clinics I work in are used to it. And I work in rural areas, so I've been telling a lot of my patients about online meetings also for years. There's a lot of online meetings. And so now I gather what has happened is over the past 2 weeks, the recovery community, AA, NA, Al-Anon, has just completely shifted to meetings like we're having right now, where it's all online, it's all by Zoom or other sorts of online processes. And I don't know how much problems they've had doing it. Somebody had to know how to do it, but it seems that people did it pretty quickly.
Maggie,
but the treatment programs are having a lot of trouble.
Well, thank you, Ed. Maggie, now from your world, where you're dealing with community-based prevention services, and I know you have contact with people across the entire spectrum, from public safety to people in treatment prevention, How are you seeing the effects of this isolation that we're looking for to help cure the pandemic on the job you have to do with prevention and the communities dealing with addiction where you are?
So I kind of have to answer that from two different perspectives. One, as a professional who works in prevention, obviously we are faced with a lot of challenges of getting education, and in prevention we have 6 different strategies. There's education, information dissemination, having alternative activities, things for people to go to. Obviously that one's pretty much out. Having this education and information reaching people is still possible, but we have to change how we do it. And I think that, here in Iowa, we are set up to, with technology, to reach people in a lot of different ways. We can still do our community-based processes through technology. As far as, my other perspective, as someone who is very much in contact with other people in recovery, when you talk about a system, when it comes to AA or NA, there isn't any system. That's one of the 12 traditions, is that AA as such ought never be organized. And so it's up to each individual group to determine if and how they want to meet. And so the way that the steps and the traditions work is there's options available. Absolutely. People still talk to their sponsors. People can still reach out via phone call. And there's lots of options available so that you're not being isolated. And what I consider to be like my home AA group, we have been meeting once, at our regularly scheduled time via Zoom, just like we are here doing this, this show. So it's working the same way, but again, it's up to each group to decide how to do that.
All right, well, thank you. I want to take a short break so we can continue this conversation and sort of get deeper into the mind of an addict and the treatment community and how they're coming together during this crisis. See you after the break. You don't want to miss this.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening, our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and Mediacom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're joined by Dr. Ed Gogek and Maggie Ballard, and we're talking about the challenges of substance abuse disorder, addiction, and recovery. Ed, welcome back. You made a great point about priorities. Share a little insight with us, please.
Well, one of my concerns is, addicts and alcoholics, their priority is getting high and, getting the drugs or alcohol to get high. And I'm afraid that for a lot of people, it's going to be much more of a priority than social distancing, than protecting themselves. And so if the choice is, am I going to get the drugs that I need, or am I going to stay safe from the virus, they're going to get the drugs they need. And I actually I was thinking about this. I know somebody whose son is addicted to marijuana, and he does not let his son smoke pot at home. But now he said, I told him, smoke pot at home. I do not want you going out anywhere, because he knows that if he's strict about it, his son's going to go out to score dope and or go out to get high and risk getting the virus.
So Maggie, how does that, what does that make you think about in a prevention context for your community?
I mean, I get it, you know, not wanting your son to go out, but, you know, I would hope that maybe they could talk to their son about some other things to do before that last resort. But like you said, we're at a challenge. We see a lot of lax laws being temporarily implemented so that people can get alcohol more easily. We see that in a lot of states, marijuana shops are being deemed essential businesses. And to people that are addicted, obviously we can understand that, you know, if I'm addicted to alcohol, then getting alcohol is absolutely essential to me. But for the vast majority of people that are drinking and using marijuana, it's not essential. And so we've seen that during this pandemic, the way that we are treating those do not necessarily match up. Not only do we see them, you know, going a step forward to saying that these are essential, no, they're not. And if they are, what that means is that those people need resources. And so I see no reason why the news isn't sharing resources for people who are addicted, like Marijuana Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, resources like that of things to do during this time, if you do feel like those things are truly essential.
Is there a way for people to connect, whether it be AA or NA, during a time like this when you can't go out anywhere?
Yes, there absolutely is. And so we see that there is, there are lots of resources out there for AA groups and NA groups that are still meeting virtually like we are now.
Ed,
a question for you. There are families like the friend you
I
talked
want
about.
to
Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was just going to say on this. Maggie's got a really good point. This is a great time to quit any addiction. You know, I think particularly for cigarette smokers. Cigarette smokers are at higher risk of dying if they get the coronavirus. People who vape are probably at higher risk of dying. And you know, most cigarette smokers have tried to quit, plan on quitting again. They want to quit. This is really, and this is not being talked about. This is really an excellent time because you know, what smokers need is something that makes it acute now. It's like, I've got to quit today. And because the problem with cigarettes is you can always put it off. And this is a really good time to quit smoking. It's a great time to quit drinking. If you can get the support and the help, it's a great time to quit drugs. I mean, I'm thinking about this, you know, for like heroin addicts, it's, you know, scoring drugs puts them at risk of coronavirus every time they do it. And this is a really good time if they can find, and I don't know what the setup is right now, but if they can, this is a really good time to seek help and get detoxed instead of going out and scoring drugs.
Now, there's a connection between getting help and being an addict, and sometimes that's an intervention. Now, you have a friend that you referred to whose son wanted to smoke pot, and you let him do it at home. You know, is it harder to do an intervention to try and initiate people getting some help when we're under this kind of pressure now, or is it an easier time?
Well, it's probably, I'm sure it's probably easier in a way because there's more pressure on people to quit. It's a better time to quit. It's just, the whole question is, do you have somebody, you know, normally when you do the intervention, I mean, there's some people, you do an intervention and they look around the room and go, well, forget it. I don't want to talk to any of you ever again. You've got to know that some people are going to refuse help and walk away. And you know, his view right now is, I don't want my son walking away from the house at all. So that is the thing. There's also, you know, I hate to talk for harm reduction in this case, but you don't want people risking getting the coronavirus. I mean, the best way to do it is to get clean and sober, clearly, but you still don't want that risk. And I know that there are going to be, you know, what's happening now is, because I'm in California right now, where yeah, the marijuana shops are deemed essential. And the reason they're deeming them essential is if they close them down, the black market would thrive and the stores would all go out of business. It doesn't have to do with people wanting their marijuana because they'll get it anyway. But it's a good time to quit. I think interventions would work right now, but it's just the risk that people are going to, in order to get drugs, are going to put themselves at risk of getting the virus.
Thank you very much, Ed. Thank you, Maggie. When we come back from a short break, we'll continue the conversation and answer a couple of questions from the audience. You don't want to miss this.
The world is talking about coronavirus, but it's hard to know what to listen to. We have answers to your questions like, who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65. People with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes. People undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov. Together, we can help stop the spread.
Welcome back. We're having a conversation about people struggling with addiction and social isolation, and there's been a great point brought up about the black market. Maggie, roll us into that discussion because it sounded fascinating.
Well, we know that in some states that have medical marijuana dispensaries or recreational marijuana dispensaries, of course, they're really the same thing, that some of them have been deemed essential. And Dr. Gogek was talking about how part of that is because if the dispensaries do not stay open, it won't make the black market thrive. But I think it's important to remember that the black market is already thriving, even in states that have legalization. The fact that, you know, drug dealers are not going to be concerned with social distancing, that's happening already. And so again, I think it just goes back to that false dichotomy about legalization or criminalization, because what we're seeing in states that have, quote, legalized marijuana is that it's really about commercializing and wanting to promote its use. It's not about saying, hey, you know, if you're wanting to get your marijuana, make sure you come to a legitimate business to get it. It's not about that. It's about getting people who are already using to use more and people who are not using to start.
Ed, you live in a world where the dialogue about marijuana has been going on for a few years. What are your thoughts?
Well, they're openly, in California, they are openly admitting that the reason they want to keep the marijuana businesses open is that they will go, the black market will completely take over and they will all go broke if they don't keep them open during the pandemic. It has nothing to do with serving people. It has to do with, it's totally protecting the industry. It's kind of funny. It's a very blue state and they're sounding very much like the Republicans more concerned about the economy right now. That they're concerned about the marijuana business. The marijuana industry just has a lot of power here in California.
What about the black market what about the real drug dealing market that's serving a lot of addicts with the heroin, the morphines, the fentanyls, the meths? I mean, what is happening in that world, in the world today that we're asking people to stay home?
Well, it's, you know, if you're an addict, getting high is a priority. So people are still going to be doing it. I know that when I've talked to treatment programs, I haven't heard treatment programs saying they're having more people coming in, which is really too bad. But plenty of treatment programs are saying they're having just as many people come in.
So we can say that treatment has a bit of inertia, but maybe getting new people into treatment's not happening during this time.
Well,
Yeah, and you would think, because you know, they know this. When drugs are harder to get, when the cost goes up, more people quit. When drugs are harder to get, more people should quit. And so it should be a little scarier to get drugs. So more people should want to quit during this.
Maggie, what are you seeing in your neck of the woods?
Maggie?
Unfortunately, I'm seeing in some of the social media groups that I'm a part of for people who are in recovery. I have to say, what's really devastating to me is that I have never seen so many posts come up about people relapsing. Because despite the availability of online meetings, like we were talking about at the very beginning of the show, recovery is meant to not do by yourself. It's supposed to be with other people. And so I have been hearing a lot more about people relapsing and using. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that people are wondering, how long am I going to have to be isolated like this? And what I tell people is, just like with anything else that we do in our recovery, we can't, the president just gave us until April 30th. Okay. I can't get myself to stay home until April 30th. Okay. I have to do it 24 hours at a time, one day at a time. The same way that I stay sober is the same way that I get myself to stay home every day. And I think that is a really hard thing to do, especially if you're new in recovery.
Well, so in some bizarre way, we're all faced with a challenge with this stay home of dealing with isolation that people that are dealing with addiction and substance abuse deal with every day.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll take a little break, and then I'll invite you both to come back and share some final comments and some good advice. For those of you watching, you don't want to miss this.
We know that we're asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
We're tracking a major problem today. Welcome to Surviving Bad. And that problem is social isolation. We can't fix it with the time we have here, but we can offer you some advice that may help you or someone you love. Let's see what our experts have to say. Maggie, share some thoughts with our audience, please.
The words of advice that I would have for the general population is to reach out to people, especially, if someone happens to be what you might consider to be a problem drinker, or someone who seems like they might be having an issue with the substance of their choice. Reach out and talk to them, encourage them to find an online AA or NA meeting. Talk to them about calling the quit line in order to stop smoking. All of these, are things that people have to want to do themselves, but it never hurts to hear from somebody else in their life that, hey, I'm thinking about you, I care about you, there's resources available.
So Maggie, what I'm hearing is that there may be people out there that do feel really isolated, and maybe more so than just to stay at home. And that if you know someone that you think might be dealing with that, it'd be a good person to reach out to, even if maybe not under the premise of an intervention, just to try and give them some contact?
Absolutely. Yeah. And people who, are actively using, or people who, have maybe talked about, hey, I've been to treatment, I haven't used for a couple of months, I think things are going really well. If that's the last thing that you heard from them, that's great. And hopefully that keeps going. But there's a good chance that with this pandemic, all of a sudden things have turned and they're saying, oh, this isn't going well at all. Because my resources are not the same as they were before all of this started.
Well, thank you very much, Maggie. Ed, what can you help us with today?
I think, the main advice I'd give really to everybody, but especially people in recovery or people who are thinking about being in recovery, is use your telephone several times a day. I talked to somebody in recovery. He said he can't believe how many times he's talking to friends, family, other people in recovery. It's really important because you're not seeing them in person. Telephone is really, really important. The other thing is, if you've been thinking about quitting drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, this is a great time to quit, especially cigarettes, because it puts you at risk for, complications from the virus. And that's a pretty scary thing. So this is a really good time to quit, but people should be staying in touch with a lot of people several times a day.
Now, can you share, the idea of quitting is pretty daunting for people, as you know, in the business you're in. Can you share maybe some tips for an individual to kind of come to face or to grips with the idea of maybe stopping a smoking or reducing other high-risk behavior?
It depends what you're quitting. I mean, for cigarettes, it takes the average person 10 to 30 tries to quit smoking. So don't be surprised if the first tries don't last that long. But the thing is, each time you try, you learn a little something from it. As far as quitting drugs, alcohol and the opiates are the only ones that really, and barbiturates, sedatives, are the only ones that need to be medically detoxed, or sometimes need to be medically detoxed. People who are on meth, people who are on marijuana, they can just quit and go through the withdrawal symptoms. And then the thing is, what you do is what Maggie said, you reach out, you go to the online meetings. This is the old-fashioned way. You talk to a lot of people in recovery several times every day. You can spend all day long talking to people in recovery if you're quitting. If you're quitting smoking, a lot of states have their own programs to help people quit smoking. They're available by phone. It's really important to not do it on your own, but to do it talking to people, hours every day, talking to other people about the whole process of quitting. That's really what helps you the most.
Well, thank you both so very much. And thank you all for joining us today. If you go to our website, ahealthyiowa.org, and register for updates, you can get news of our upcoming shows. Keep an eye on Mediacom MC22 for our next episode, where we explore Iowa's stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Only on Mediacom MC22, your local programming leader. Thank you.
If you or someone you care about are looking for help with treatment or recovery, there is help out there. Please visit these sites.